Yeah. I don't have any audio. Oh, never mind. I got it.
Okay, we'll bring our regular session to order with the start of the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start the meeting tonight. We actually have a public hearing and then a public forum. Start with the one up on the projector here with the communicable disease pandemic. Okay. Move around. Second. All right. So we have two public forums tonight. One is on the communicable disease pandemic plan. Anytime that we have a change to our district safety plan, we're required by law to have a public hearing, which we're having tonight. And we did discuss this at our last Board of Education meeting as well. So I'm just going to go over some of the main parts of this, and we'll move on to the budget. The public has the ability to put some comments or questions in the chat. Mike is going to keep track of that for us, and Mike, just let me know if any questions or comments come up.
Sure.
On either one of these. So this was this is effective April 1st, 2021. Boards of education need to have a communicable disease pandemic plan in case in the future we have another outbreak, another pandemic of a communicable disease, that there are certain aspects in place, particularly for protection of our employees. This is related to Labor Law 27C and Labor Law 27-1. And it requires public employers to prepare a plan in the event that we have another emergency. Now, I've been working with the District Safety Committee Chair, Alan Oliver, who's here, our St. Lawrence Louis Bosse's Safety Officer, or Jeff Louis Bosse, excuse me, to draft the plan. We also shared it with our labor unions leadership and asked for their input, and we did receive some input on this agreement. So the plan forward would be to review this with the public, and it's on for the board to review and approve tonight. I'll just point out a couple of sections. There is a definition section which describes essential versus non-essential. It's important to point out that those definitions don't have anything to do with the value of the job that people are doing. It has to do specifically with the law and how it's designated. So an essential worker is one where a public employee or contractor is required to physically be present to do their work. They have to be physically present in order to perform their duties. A non-essential worker would be one that they do not need to be physically present at work to perform the duties of their job, and that's the difference. So we have created within that essential worker list, we've actually put together a spreadsheet of all of our employee roles, and they're tiered. So under that essential workers, a tier 1 would be someone who has to be here all the time in order to perform their job. Without exceptions. A tier 2 would be someone who can be here part of the time and then could work remotely part of the time. And a tier 3 would be someone who would work most of the time in the building, but they, for emergency types of situations, would have to come into the building. So that's a kind of a key component, is designating what's essential, what's non-essential. And then there's planned in there for access to technology, that we provide the appropriate technology in order for the school to function, that we'd stagger work shifts to ensure there's no overcrowding, that we would have a plan for procuring personal protective equipment for our employees, that we would have a plan for what happens if someone's exposed to the communicable disease. We have a plan for cleaning and disinfecting in order to protect against the disease. And those are really the main points of this plan for our employees. Any questions in here about it?
What's the limit to which we'll provide access to technology?
In terms of what would you mean by limit, Kevin?
Are there limits?
I think it depends on the job role. I think what we're talking there mostly is about, do you need to have a computer? Do you need to have internet access? It would be similar to what we've experienced in this pandemic, to make sure that they have that type of equipment. Anything in the chat yet, Mike?
No questions at this time.
We'll move on to the forum on the budget. This is our second one, and if any other questions or comments come up on the pandemic plan, we'll cover those too.
Okay.
So this is the second of our three public forums that we're doing on the 21-22 budget. We had a finance committee meeting earlier tonight. It's important to note that these are still preliminary numbers. I know we've heard a lot about the federal stimulus plan, which is called the American Rescue Plan, that's been passed. We've also heard quite a bit about the Senate and the State Assembly with their one-house budgets, but we don't yet have that information as far as what is after the Assembly leaders and the Senate leaders and the governor sit down and hammer out a final budget. We don't have that information. So we're still really using the governor's proposal that they had that he presented in January. So on the PowerPoint, I'm not going to run through all of this information, but if you'll go, Angie, to the governor's budget proposal. Next slide. Well, actually, back up to the state budget deficit. One more. There you go, right there. Okay, so basically, this is a lot of numbers about the fact that we entered into this budget year with significant state budget deficit, and there still is a significant state budget deficit at this time. And that is definitely driving lots of decisions, including here. And then the governor came out with his proposal, which was a $2.11 billion increase in total school aid. A large part of that increase was related to federal stimulus money, contingent upon receiving $6 billion in federal stimulus money, because there was actually a $607 million decrease in state funding as part of this. And also, it was taking money from the STAR program to balance the budget, taking our expense aids and putting them all into one, and making significant cuts to those service aids like BOCES, transportation, etc., and partially reimbursing us for transportation aid that we lost last year. So the governor's budget, one of the main concerns is that a lot of the money was put in the first year, the federal money, and we're looking at some significant cliffs, as they're called, down the road, if the state revenues didn't come back again. Next slide. This is just those service aids I talked about that he consolidated all into one. Next slide. It's the foundation aid. We've talked about this before. The district is not receiving its full foundation aid formula. If it was running on formula, we'd receive $9.1 million than we receive now in state aid. Next slide. We talked before about transportation aid. During the pandemic, when we were closed down from March to June, our drivers continued to work. We were asked to keep our employees working and expected we would receive aid on it. We found out later in the fall that we weren't going to receive this aid. And so that's a concern to us. Also, our one-to-one aides that work with some of our high-need students, we weren't going to be reimbursed for that either. So that was a concern that we were working on in the state budget. Next slide. That's the 118 I talked about. And then you have the American Rescue Plan. This is the new stimulus money, and this for New York is $12.5 billion in unrestricted fiscal aid, $8.9 billion for elementary and secondary education. The funding will be distributed based on Title I. Title I funding formula is based on poverty, and so we would expect to see a significant amount to high needs districts like Massena. Money has to be set aside for in using the federal aid for the expected learning loss. This has been very difficult for our students in the type of model that we've had to use during the pandemic. Hybrid model, the remote learning. We expect and know there are learning gaps, there's social emotional issues, and many issues, and some of our money needs, through this federal funding, would be set aside to deal with those, and we are planning for that. This money could be, we haven't received the specific information how this would be done, but the money can be spread out over 3 years, so we could be using it for the 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24 school year. Next, please. So the next steps in the process. So we know there's some federal money coming. There's some help on the way that's going to help schools, and it's going to help our school. But we don't know yet until the state legislature and the governor sit down and work through these complexities and give us a state aid run to show us exactly how much we are going to receive. So we really don't know until that happens. The state constitutionally is to have a budget in place by April 1st. And we're hoping that we see an on-time budget because the board needs to approve our school budget at the next board meeting on April 19th. So the State Assembly passed their one-house bills. Now they'll meet with the governor, in our meeting with the governor. Both of them would significantly increase state funding for school aid over what the governor proposed. Both say that they would be looking at a $3.1 billion or a 12% increase over the prior year for aid. That would include, they would pretty much wipe away quite a few of the items that the governor had proposed, such as the local district funding adjustment against the STAR program, such as combining those services aids we talked about, such as increasing rather than freezing foundation aid. They're looking at increasing that by $1.4 billion. Again, that's part of that $3 billion I talked about, but 1.4 would be foundation aid, which is our main operating. Both of them have agreed to that, the Senate and the Assembly. They also have a plan for fully phasing in the foundation aid formula over the next 3 years. Both have stated that they would pay for those standby costs, the ones that had yet to be allocated by the governor. Those were paying for bus drivers back in during when we closed school, rather than putting those costs on the district. We haven't seen them say anything yet about the one-to-one aids, which was about a $400,000 cost to us. So that's the next steps. And we expect we'll have another Finance Committee meeting, as we talked about tonight with the Finance Committee, just after the budget comes out and before our school budget. Next slide is the property tax cap. Really, the only change there, the CPI this year is 1.81, and the tax cap is 2% or CPI, whichever is lower, but it's an 8-part formula that considers a lot of things. Actually, our cap would be 3.13%, but under the circumstances, we're recommending at this point either a 0 or a 1.23%, depending on how the state aid comes in. So we could be looking anywhere from a 0 to a 1.23%. So you can read about the specific amounts in the governor's budget for state aid. I'm not going to go over all that now. Those are really subject to change as soon as we see what the final budget is. Next slide gives you a graphic of our aid that we've received over time. Up to 2021, you see that went down slightly. Next is the salary and benefits. We're seeing some pretty significant pension increases this year after last year they had gone down, and that's the way it works with the pension system. It's a 5-year rolling average, and it goes up, it goes down. And this year it's going back up again. But our health insurance benefits and some of these others are not going up, and that's helpful this year. Next slide. You see just a graphic illustration of the changes in the teacher's retirement system and the employee retirement system over time. Next one is the health insurance costs over time, currently at about $11.5 million. Next slide. You see our projected revenues and expenses for next year. We're showing a gap of 1.458 million, which will be used with fund balance to bridge the gap. And you see the areas where expenses are changing. A large part of our increase this year is principal and interest for our capital project. $643,000 of the increase is, by far, the largest increase is for the capital project. But you have revenue on the other side of that. That's just the expense. That only tells you half the story. The other half of the story is we'll receive state aid on that, and we'll still continue to fulfill our pledge that this capital project, $49.6 million project, will be cost neutral. It will not cost the community anything locally. Next slide, please. This is just a breakdown of our staff to see appropriated fund balance. This is the money we use out of our fund balance. Generally, you want this trend to be going down. You don't want to be using your savings account to balance your budget. And you can see that trend has been largely going down. Last year went back up again, but we're not expected to spend all that money in this budget by not really spending much of it. But last year we had frozen state aid. That's the start of the pandemic. You expect that you're going to use more of your savings to balance your budget when times are tough. That's why it's there. We have a tax levy history. It's in there. This basically goes to show you that what we show you right now when the board passes the budget in April doesn't necessarily mean when you pass that tax levy that that's what the tax rate is going to be. In fact, many times, as we did last year, the tax rate actually went down a little bit because you have to take into consideration the growth of assessments in the community. Next one, budget request. Now, this is one of the oddest years that we've had with budget because we started this year thinking that it was going to be, and rightly so, that we were looking at probably making some significant cuts. There's huge deficits for the state. Didn't look like we were going to get a significant amount of federal help. And now it looks like we are going to get federal help. We are going to. It doesn't look like it. We are going to get federal help. We don't know how much that is yet. But so usually I would ask the administrators to come to me with some things that they needed. We didn't do that this year, but now we are going to take a relook. And we do know there's going to be some learning gaps, and we're going to focus in those areas as before we end our budget process. And finally, one more, budget propositions. At this point, this is what the public will see when they go to vote. And we do expect that there will be we do anticipate it be a regular vote this year, that it won't be sending out all absentee ballots. I certainly hope not. That was really hard last year. So we expect it'll look more normal this year, but we're waiting on that information. But what they will see when they vote is that it would be expending the sum of $58.2 million on the budget. We have 2 candidates that are up for election this year. And petitions for any board candidates are due on April 19th, and are required to have 25 signatures in order to get on the ballot. Next one, Proposition 1. This is all included in the budget. Would be 4 buses. We keep our buses. We try to have 4 in, 4 out each year to keep our fleet up to date, and also our capital outlay project, which is $100,000 in our budget a year, which is state aidable at our aidable rate for small projects that we do. And if you just go to the last slide, we'll show you what's next. The important dates are, this is tonight, our second public forum. Then on the 19th, the board will be expected to pass the school budget. And then there'll be another public hearing on that on May 6th. And then the public votes on budget and 2 board members, 2 board positions, I should say, on the 18th of May. Any questions in here on that?
Petition process open now?
It is. Pick up petitions from the district clerk. Angie. Mike, do we have any comments or questions?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. You must have done a good job.
Yes.
All right.
All right, next item is approval of minutes from actually the 2 meetings we had in February, a regular meeting on the 11th, and then we had the special board meeting for the roofing contract on the 22nd. So we'll do those together unless someone wants to talk about them separately. I get a motion to approve the minutes from the February 11th and February 22nd meetings. I moved it. Second. Any more discussion? All those in favor then? We did have one board correspondence. It was from the board legislature. They approved a referendum for, we call them let them play. So they urge Section 10 and school districts to allow the high-risk sports to play, and that is our plan and moving forward with that. As you see, we'll have some coaches on the agenda for approval tonight. So I just wanted to share that with anyone. The legislature just encouraged the district and school districts to have those sports. So we'll go to our committee meetings, and Mr. Peretta, if you want to share some from the facilities, I don't know, we're going to talk a little bit more tonight.
I think everything's going to be covered in the meeting, unless anyone has any questions.
Very
We're
good.
going to talk about snowplow contract, capital project, everything.
Next would be policy committee, Mr. Hackett.
Okay, well, you do have to hear from me.
Because I think Lauren's going to throw it in.
So we do have some policies that are up for first reading tonight, and I'll just hit a few of those. Policy 3420, non-discrimination and anti-harassment, is on tonight's agenda for a first reading. That has been renumbered in our policy manual to reflect Erie 1 numbering, and it also updates some language to include social media and other technology type things that didn't exist when the last revision to that policy was made. It allows for appointment of a second civil rights compliance officer in a case where there's a conflict of interest with the primary. Another new required policy on tonight's agenda is number 5633, gender neutral single occupancy bathrooms. It's a law that we have to provide these in the schools. And the law takes effect on March 23rd, so we're simply complying with state law on that. In the 6000 series, we have the policy 6110, the code of ethics for board members and district personnel. It was last updated in 2016. And there are some minor changes in language. Again, this is a first reading, so we have another look at this next week. And since this does apply to board members in particular, we should probably all take an opportunity to review the Code of Ethics. It's always a good idea. Policy 6111, building assignments of husbands and wives and blood relations. We're recommending to rescind that. That is not a policy that exists in the Erie 1 policy manual, and Mr. Brady has found that difficult, if not impossible, to stick to because of just the way some high school teachers are married to other high school teachers, and there's very little getting around that, just as an example. That's about it for policies that I wanted to mention. We also had a presentation at our policy committee meeting on stop arm cameras. We asked Alan Rawledge to come in and talk to us about that. Stop arm cameras are basically cameras that are video cameras that are mounted to the stop arm of a school bus and would take video when students are being picked up or dropped off. And that's a tool for law enforcement to prosecute as evidence for prosecution of motorists that pass a stopped school bus. There was a state law passed in 2019 that allows districts to enter an intermunicipal agreement with local government where the municipality actually pays for the installation of stop arm cameras. And that has proven to be somewhat unwieldy. It's not really taken advantage of or utilized very much statewide. It's mostly regionally that's done, and primarily on Long Island. Alan Rowledge told us that he finds that it's not a very effective arrangement. There are not many local governments that have the funds to provide stop arm cameras to school districts. There's also the video by the law is supposed to be retained by the law enforcement agency or the local government. The school district would rather have that footage, so it's unwieldy. It's not a well-written law. All that said, the cameras only cost about $1,000 or so, and they are state aidable. They could be put on buses, for instance, that we would be purchasing on a year-to-year basis, roughly 4 a year, like we are this year. And Alan, at our meeting, suggested that that might be a way to go, so that we could, pretty much on the cheap, purchase some of these cameras, use them on some of the bus runs where there is a higher likelihood of motorists potentially passing a stopped school bus. However, Mr. Brady has sought, some advice from council and talked to some of the local law enforcement folks, and we're not ready to talk about the results of those meetings just yet. He would like to have further conversations with the committee before we come with any recommendation potentially of moving forward with acquiring stop arm cameras on some of our buses. Are there any questions on any of that? That's it for me.
Thank you, Paul. Next, Finance Committee.
Yeah, Mr. Brady did a lovely job of
Yeah.
so we're kind of keeping our eyes and ears open and see where we'll end up and make adjustments as necessary. I think we're in a little better position than we'll probably be looking in January, but nothing's in stone yet. So until we can understand how the federal funding works, it's going to be hard for us to know how it works yet.
And timing is going to be
Yeah,
an issue.
of the essence, so to speak.
Anything else? Any questions for Lauren?
I will say it's somewhat refreshing to hear Mr. Brady say that potentially looking at adding some things that are going to benefit students educationally, in an effort to make up for some of the pandemic, difficulties in teaching that we've been experiencing. That's a good thing.
Okay, next we'll hear from our students. Ms. Durant, if you would, please.
The student president of the class of 2022 and their advisor have contacted me to propose a statement in their behalf to the board tonight. Their junior class student council is planning and would like to hold a prom-like event this June. The students would like to give the board an advance notice that a safety plan will be presented hopefully at the next meeting. This event will be held within the first 2 weeks of June and will be attended by approximately 200 students. Prom is an event that every high school student should be able to attend within their high school career. Our seniors never had this option as juniors. Let's please find a way to make this event happen. A full plan will be presented to the board in April, but we would like to have you, the board members, consider this event.
Let's make it happen.
We've had some discussions with Alan and I know Alan has been working with the advisor to try to see if we can come up with an event. We do have to stay within the New York State Department of Health guidelines when it comes to the number of people who can be at a public event, which currently is 100 inside and 200 outside. But if Delaney's saying they want to stay within those parameters and can come up with a safety plan, we are trying to see if we can make that work.
I'm in full support of it, because typically if you don't take care of it, they're gonna take care of it.
I like the idea, but there are definitely some difficult hurdles.
Well, the numbers are going in the basement, and vaccinations are hopefully going up, and hopefully most of this garbage goes away.
I hope we can make it happen.
And we have 2 months, before a prom would typically
All for
happen.
it.
So.
We have to, do it by
Oh,
rules.
absolutely. Yeah. I in no way want to upstage Delaney, but there was one part that I left out of my policy committee report. I just wanted to point out that we had a development relative to the student dress code that we've talked about, having to do with graduation attire. And apparently the diversity committee and the student body have settled on red graduation gowns for the standard graduation dress.
Was that voted on by the student body?
I don't know.
How specifically was that done?
I don't know.
Because that's a pretty succinct statement you just made, so I'm curious how it was done. Because I had to listen to it at my house about it, so I was very interested in this.
I'm not sure who exactly I know the student that gave out a survey, a Google Forms survey, and we talked to teachers, and they said that they usually only get like 20 to 30% of response on surveys. So I'm not sure exactly how much student body voted on it. It was more if they opened the email and saw it, but we usually don't get very much response on those surveys, so I'm not sure how many students it was.
They were all given the opportunity though, correct?
Yes, they were all given the opportunity.
Seems like a pretty significant change, but that's the world we live in.
Delaney, anything else?
No, I don't have anything.
The only item I had was, and we touched on it quite a bit during the presentation for the budget, but it's surrounding the number of signatures required on a petition to run for school board. The governor actually had to make an amendment to the law. The way it's written, it's 2% of your previous year's voters, or 25, whichever is less, whichever's more. So anyway, because there was such a high turnout in 2020, because we sent ballots out to everybody, he rewrote it, and we're using 2019 as our base year for those calculations. So basically, to cut to the chase, it's 25 signatures required on the petition. Again, you can pick them up for Angie, our district clerk, and they're due back April 19th. I encourage the public out there. It's a valuable, really valuable experience to be a part of and to learn how complicated a school district is. It's been a great experience, speaking for myself. So. Anyway, that's it for me.
Okay.
Turn it over
All
to
right.
Mr. Grady.
Well, it's always a great night when we can honor one of our own teachers, and that's the first thing that I have on the agenda tonight is to honor Darcy Frigo. And Darcy's going to come up along with Danielle Chapman, the principal at Madison. So it is my pleasure to recognize Darcy tonight. She has won a national award in science teaching. I did give the board a press release on that. I think the press release did a great job of identifying that Darcy, understand this is a national award. It's 2021 recipient of the Edward C. Roy Jr. Award for Excellence in K-8 Earth Science Teaching. It's only given to one teacher in the nation each year, and she'll be honored at a convention on that. It goes on to describe her all the degrees that she's very well educated over her years, 31 years of experience. Has many recognitions: the National Wildlife Federation, Eco Schools Green Flag Award, a first scholarship for First U.S. U.S. Air Force Academy Leadership Training, Alcoa Foundation Award, a Keystone Science Institute, and New York State Educator of the Week. We know Darcy, besides all the inspiration she's given to our students, the robotics is something that is a signature for Darcy. And she has, as it says, spent 2 decades teaching 6th grade earth science, focusing on topics underscored by the New York State middle level science learning standards such as earth systems, history, weather, climate, human impacts. And she's drawing on technology and emphasizing project-based learning, cross-curricular connections. She's served on numerous committees, coached, advised students, mentored educators, and has published research on reflecting journalism in the science classroom. And as was quoted by the interim executive director of the American Geosciences Institute that sponsors this award, Darcy Frigo is the sort of earth science educator every young person should have. Noted for the passion, the excitement she brings to instruction, she leads her students to hands-on investigations, projects in the school, local community, and wider world, engaging their curiosity and various talents. And that sums it up. Darcy is just a tremendous teacher, inspiring kids for many years to science and technology. We congratulate her.
Darcy certainly is deserving of this award. She certainly understands the best practices of teaching. She plans and teaches engaging lessons. I always love going into her classroom to observe her, especially when she lets me watch E.T. as she's as she's teaching the phases of the moon. Can you believe that? I'm like, wow, what is she doing with E.T.? And then she brought us through, and I stayed the whole time to watch. She's an amazing teacher. Just recently, she applied to the American Geoscience Institute and ExxonMobil Exploration Teacher Leadership Academy. This is a 7-day virtual experience where K-8 teachers from around the country will be provided with activities to refresh and enhance earth science content knowledge, access to and guides for hands-on STEM activities and resources. I'm crossing my fingers that she's able to get into this. She wants to bring this back to our district, all that she learns there, and she'd be a great participant in it. So thank you, Darcy, for all you do for our kids.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much to Mrs. Chapman for all the support. Thank you very much for inviting me here tonight, for the very kind words, and I really appreciate the recognition. I love earth science, I love my job, I love teaching 6th grade, and I very much appreciate the recognition. Thank you so much.
Your husband's here tonight, and it does take a village. Do you want to?
Absolutely.
How are you?
Jerry?
Well, thank you, Jerry, for allowing her all the hours that she stays after to help all of our students.
No, it does take a village, and we were students here many years ago. We have brought our own students up, our own children up as students here, and we know how incredible Massena Central is. And I see parents of former students, and yeah, this is one terrific school district, and I very much appreciate being here and for the recognition tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks to all All right. I talked about the capital project a little bit earlier. We have an update from our architect and CM. Mike's going to come up and get them on the phone, and Angie is going to put their slides up.
Hey, yeah, this is Mike Allen from Massena Central. I'm going to try to conference you in with Jim, and then I'm going to have Pat Horahan as well.
Okay.
All right, hang on one second. Hey Jim, it's Mike Allen from Massena Central. I've got you on the line with Ed and the board. I'm going to conference one more person in on the call, okay? Okay. Hey, yeah, this is Mike. Hang on one second. Usually I can get 2 with no problem, because 3 is the strong. Hey Jim? Hey Jim, sorry, it's Mike. I lost you. Hang on. Hey guys. Hey guys, hang on, I gotta get one more person on the line, hopefully. No, it's not. Come on. It's good too. They gotta bring Patrick Watt back. Hey Pat, it's Mike Allen from Massena Central. I'm gonna conference in with Jim and Ed and the board. Yep. Hey guys, is everybody there?
Ed Bernauer here.
Jim, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Pat, you're there too?
I'm here.
Perfect, my job's done.
All right, guys. Ed, I think you're going to take it away and just talk about phase two.
Yep, and actually, forgive me here, hold on. My computer, I was just getting ready to go, and my computer's having a little technical difficulty here. Hold on one second. All right, can you gentlemen hear me all right? Is everybody there?
Everybody here can hear you.
Okay, great. So, and we have our slides up past, for some reason I can't get into the Zoom, so I'm going to go from...
Yeah, we have the title slide, and Angie will go forward for you.
Terrific.
All set?
I think so. Hold on one second. Again, my computer's just adjusting here.
Pat, YouTube is off about 10 seconds.
Okay. Are you on YouTube, Ed?
No, that's the part that I was trying to get to work and it wasn't working. I'm basically just dialed in here, and what I'll do is I'll just look at the presentation from my end, and if you guys just kind of follow along with the slides, we'll go that way, please.
Okay.
So, as we're looking at our slides here, we figure we'd just give a quick update to you guys this evening. A lot of the items are the same as we had before, but we do have some unique things to report. So, as we go to, for our agenda tonight, we're just going to go over our capital improvements project, and this is on the second slide. We're going to be looking at phase 1, 2, and 3. A quick update for our building condition survey, and then also for our capital outlay project. If we go to the third slide, we'll talk about the capital improvements first. One of the things that we will report, as you guys know, is we have had the rebid for the phase 1 roofing that is complete, and our contracts have been awarded to A.W. Farrell & Son for both the roofing contract 1 and contract 2. Also, too, as just since we've kind of put this presentation together, we've also had a significant number of submittals that the contractor has already gotten in and have approved. So we're off and running with our the last kind of component to our roofing work as part of the capital improvement. Also, too, for phase 2, we have submitted to SCD, as you know, and we've received not only the third-party approval now, but we also do have the architectural and engineering approval. Also, kind of late-breaking news today, I was contacted by our project manager, and they are finalizing the project manager approval as well. So currently, right now, we are preparing to begin our bidding process, and we'll be uploading to the print house tomorrow on March 19th. As part of that, we are planning on having our bid opening. One thing to kind of update here, we did have April 13th, I believe. We decided that the best day is actually April 15th. So again, a new late breaking update to this particular presentation, but we will be having our bid opening for phase 2 of the capital improvements on April 15th. And then in addition to that, phase 3 is currently in design. And as part of that, we're looking towards the May submission to SED. Once again, as you recall, phase 2 will have summer construction this summer as well as next summer, the summer of 2022. And then our phase 3 is actually split into summer construction for the year 2022 and 2023. So I guess at this point I would ask, is there any questions on our capital improvements portions of our work, the phase 1, 2, or 3?
So we'll be advertising next week, but we'll be...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Wednesday, it'll appear in your official paper.
Okay.
All right, so if we move on to the next one, also I just did want to report, we have completed the first step of our building condition survey. So our SED forms have been submitted, and all of the information has been entered into the portal and actually verified and is completed. So our next steps with this is we take the building condition survey as reported to the State Education Department, and we'll begin developing our 5-year plan, which basically takes a look at all of the different items that we've enumerated that need some work at each of the buildings and how those will be planned out over the next 5-year cycle for this. And we're going to be jumping into that next for our next steps. One of the things, too, that we did talk about is at our next board meeting, I'll share with you guys the actual SED form reports. We thought that might be a little bit lengthy for this evening's meeting. But at next month's meeting, we'll actually do a full report on each of those surveys for each of our educational facilities and our 2 support buildings, and we'll kind of see how those all panned out once again for the completion of the BCS. Any questions on the building condition survey, guys, for at this point, or the 5-year plan?
Looks like we're good, Ed.
No? Okay. So moving on to our next slide, our capital outlay projects. And for our capital outlay project, as we said, actually tomorrow we have our second pre-construction meeting for the 2021 capital outlay project, where we will be working on the fuel station. Part of that is really kind of like we've already got the initial items out of the way in an earlier pre-construction meeting as far as contractual items, the middle, and the process with the contractor and schedule. This meeting is really our pre-mobilization meeting to start construction for spring break. And so our construction will be over the break and beginning on April 2nd, which is coming right up here. And also, too, you can see here what our current costs are, just under our $100,000 maximum, which is right where we want to be. So we're in good shape on this project. And again, construction will be starting very soon, and with our pre-mobilization conference tomorrow. And also, too, as we know, we talked a little bit in our last meeting, our next capital outlay project has also been planned for, and that would be the telephone system head-end replacement for district-wide for the buildings for our 21-22 capital outlay project. And again, that particular project is included in the budget vote process that's coming out this May. So any questions on capital outlay projects?
No, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's basically all I had to report this evening as well. So is there any kind of general questions about capital improvements or facilities improvements?
Jim and Pat, are there any updates that you guys have?
This is Jim. We have no real major updates since our last report. I can add that we are in the process of trying to finalize within the next week our Phase 1 2021 master project schedule. We've received information from Paris. We're waiting to get information from the rest of the contractors, and hopefully we'll have that distributed to the district within the next week and a half, so that we have something concrete in front of us to carry us through the end of Phase 1. Also, with a nice side note that we did receive the insulated metal panels. Those were something that we were waiting for last year with manufacturing delays, but now we have them on site this year. We're trying to get those up. Those are nice things to report on. Other than that, we are just like Ed, waiting for Phase 2 to hit the street and see where that leads us.
The insulated metal panels that he's talking about would be the ones that go on the outside of the high school where you see them. You see them from the highway side along the auditorium, as well as the junior high school above the gymnasium and along the side of the front walkway into the junior high school. We're waiting for those to come.
Is it, with the bids coming out pretty soon, have you got any indication of, excuse me, with the bids coming out soon, do you have any indication of the interest yet? You guys usually unofficially, I know, push things around. And then do you anticipate any issues with the timing? Because it's kind of a little late in the season, it's a little later in the season.
Did you get that question, Ed? Jim?
Yeah, and I guess I'll kind of touch on part of it. We just recently had a couple bids more in our area, and actually we received really good results. So whereas prior we were kind of nervous about potentially the pandemic affecting some of the costs and elevating some of the costs that we've seen, especially on the material side, we've seen in our last few bids that actually hasn't been true. We've actually had good numbers. So we're hoping that holds true for this bid as well. We do actually have already heard from some contractors that are interested. In particular, one of the contractors that we're working with currently already for our Phase 1 project, and they're interested in bidding Phase 2 as well. So that was good news. So I guess at that point I turn it over to Jim and Pat, like what you guys have seen with your recent bid, the comment on that as well.
You know, we're seeing across the board, typically in the last few bids that we've had, general contractor-wise, 8, 9, or 10 general contractors, all competitive pricing. Again, ideally, this is late in the season, but we're still holding pretty good. We just had bids yesterday in Peru, and Jim, you guys probably got a little bit better update on that, what the turnout was there.
Yeah, we had a really good turnout across all trades, and Peru was at its last phase of their construction cycle, and this phase came in under budget, so that was nice. I think it's important to point out to people that we spent some extensive time in planning for Phase 2 on your project to allow for continuous work, and versus the summer crunch that typically one sees on capital improvement projects. So I think that aspect alone is going to draw more people in and pique more interest, because contractors will have a spot to keep their personnel working for a good year versus, a hard 3 or 4 months. And we did that intentionally just to try and ensure us a good competition
Okay, thanks. Thanks. Other questions?
Just as far as the capital outlay project, the fueling station should be pretty well up to snuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's, I'm pretty sure that's the last of it. I can't speak for these guys, but I mean, that was put in early 2000. I want to say 2003, so it's, you know,
Should be.
yeah.
Yeah, this was the second and final phase, so it'll be done.
And that, but no.
Okay. Well, it's good to hear the state head is finally looking at approving this. We can get it out and start getting bids. I know you guys will round up as many as you can. As I said, it's a little bit later. We have a little more planning to do, but you know, hopefully it'll be good and competitive for us. A lot of work this summer. We're going to be looking at roofs, tearing off roofs at Nightingale, Madison, site work at Madison, all of that work there, all the site work at Jefferson, and also getting into schools for, particularly elementary, for mechanical work, baseball field, soccer field out back. We had graduation. It's going to be a busy, busy summer and into next year. All right, guys, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that was it. Thank you so much for the time this evening.
Okay. All right.
How are you? Have a good night. Good night.
Bye now.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We're on to, next is the musical and extracurriculars. At the last board meeting, request was made to report on opportunities that students are having for extracurriculars, and particularly there was a reference to a musical for this year, so we've done some work in that area, and Chris Lincoln, our drama club advisor, is here, and Alan Oliver, to present where we are with the musical this year.
First, we're going to make this exceptionally brief, and then leave time for question and answer. After the last board meeting, which I was obviously privy to, we had the state decision to open up high-risk winter sports, the local decision to follow suit. Almost immediately, Mr. Lincoln was in my office, or may have been texting me while the board meeting was going on, requesting that we look forward to bring some equity into the performing arts and pursue the plan for the musical, which I believe we started writing the very next day. So I don't want to step on the musical because I would butcher it. I'll hand it over to Mr. Lincoln. But know that the plan we put in front of you takes the best we could find from other local school districts, from National Theater, sort of recommendations, our own safety plans. We borrowed heavily by looking at Mr. Reagan's high-risk winter sports plans, and all of that informs the document we put in front of you tonight, and we are seeking you to allow us to move forward with this plan this evening.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, we do appreciate just even the comments last time that came up in the board meeting. By the way, for those that don't know me, I'm Chris Lincoln. I think they already said that. But on Alan's, Alan did a good hefty lift on this document here, and I think the best statement on the bottom is, based upon these circumstances, we are seeking to offer a musical performance in the spring of 21 which balances health and safety while offering students an opportunity to perform. And I see my job as a facilitator. If there's a way to do a musical, it'd be great to pull one off. The students have all been sort of eagerly kind of knocking on, is it going to be possible? Are we going to be able to do it? Just in speaking with Alan and Pat and whatever, we want to try to find the best wise decision, the middle ground. I was sharing that if there's a ceiling, we don't really want to brush our head up against it. But if there's a way to do this in a safe way that still allows students to perform and have a staged show this year, that would be wonderful. I don't really, if you want me to highlight any of this, I can. It's pretty similar, like Alan said, to Gavin's great presentation. We definitely stole that from him. And Canton as well. Canton High School is moving ahead with their musical production, and I did steal some stuff from them, borrow stuff from them, and consulted with them as well. So If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything.
Can you talk about what the musical is?
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. Well, we decided...
No. You have to say yes first.
So, yeah. Does that, should I say that? No. The thought was small cast, small pit, very minimal set requirements. So minimalistic is the way to go. We're going to have, the plan as you see there, the dates that are listed, if it's approved, is basically a 5-week run, which is less than half of what we usually have. So Little Shop of Horrors fits that bill quite nicely. Small cast, small crew, small pit, only 5 members in the pit. There's no wind instruments, so there's nothing there to worry about as far as aerosol issues and that kind of thing. It's just rock band kind of stuff. So Little Shop of Horrors is what we're planning. We can go ahead.
Other questions? Alan, do you want to just touch on briefly, I know you put together also through the other advisors, what are some other things that are going on extracurricularly at the...
Oh, sure, throw me on the spot, right?
Well,
I'm up here in front of everybody.
Just in general.
In general, we're running, I don't know, percentage-wise, we're definitely not at 100% of what we would normally run, but we're somewhere north of 50% of what we would normally run. The class advisors are still happening, the class officers are still meeting, student council is still happening, the chess club's running, the anime club's running, but all of this is running in sort of a virtual world. There are virtual meetings, Zoom meetings, the anime club gets together and watch movies together virtually with one another. Chess club is meeting online and playing chess virtually with one another. We're doing the very best we can within the confines of the health and safety requirements we have to live under to give as many opportunities as we can. I think we're doing a really good job, all things considered, but it's certainly nowhere near as good as it normally is, but I think that's to be expected.
High school robotics, your vocal select group as well, Chris?
All of those are still
functioning.
Many of you may have seen our vocal select groups in the concert, which came out this week, which was just excellent, and I hope you've all had a chance to see that performance by now. We're still cranking along as best we can in the situation we're in. Is that okay?
Yep, that's good.
Chris, I have a question.
What's not happening?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I mean,
No, go ahead.
I don't want to be too far in the spot. Like you said, we're doing as much as you can, which things aren't working.
I really didn't review this before I
Okay.
came in.
I'll send you guys
yeah.
the list. I have a list, and we had to put it together. There are some that are, the Advanced Science Club.
There's things like a cooking club we
Cooking
normally
club.
run that aren't running.
Yeah.
Things like the freshman academy, really, we didn't run in the same way this year because the schedule wouldn't really allow for it with all the COVID manipulations we had to do. There's a couple, maybe a handful or 2 handfuls of things that really aren't functioning right now. They would be all of sort of the unpaid volunteer sort of clubs that we run in the school typically. I prepared a summary of it for Mr. Brady, which I'm sure he could share with you.
Spanish Club, French National Honor Society would be part of that. French Club. Mohawk Club is very active. Interact Club is very active. Art Club is not active. Those are some.
Thank you. Sorry, Paul.
No, that's okay. Just in relation to performance in particular, I can't quite make out whether it'll be kids wearing masks while performing.
That is the plan,
Okay.
yes. We are looking at trying to find, we have an amazing costume department. Amanda Traska heads that up, and we actually have like a sewing shop happening during musicals. And if we can't find the right ones, we're thinking about designing something that's kind of clear here, that will still have cloth around the outside to not allow any aerosol kind of protrusion, but there will be, you can, because on a theater, you need to see who's speaking. So there's, the
We
idea is
also
to have.
need for enunciation and
Yeah.
so forth.
And the microphones would fit inside there, that we would work out that way. We don't have it all figured out, that's for sure. We don't have it all figured out, but we're gonna make an attempt the best we can.
It was very clear in terms of rehearsals, but not performances, so that was the reason.
Yeah,
for that question.
the plan right now is that the students will wear masks the whole time. And the event, the show will just be live streamed, there'll be no audience in the room.
Right. I think that's a fair consideration to make, since basketball players are wearing masks while they're playing games.
Yeah, and even in the writing, it says that we would maintain social distancing to the best extent possible. We may not be able to maintain the same distancing as
Sure.
always. But like you said, reference to like basketball and such, it's a pretty similar parallel.
Good. This is really excellent, very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Moving on to the COVID pandemic update. As Kevin mentioned earlier, we're seeing cases going down. Last week was the first time I'd seen a couple of days where there weren't new cases in Massena. Last Friday, we were at 32 positive cases in Massena. We're down to 9 today, and there were 260 in the county last Friday, and it's 116 today. Less than 1% positivity rate. So we are moving in the right direction, and we're seeing it in the school because we, first time in a long time, we, knock on wood, we haven't had a Sunday where I'm on the phone with the head nurse and some principal, and we're dealing with a positive case and possibly, quarantine a whole bunch of people. And so that's refreshing. And I believe part of that is the fact that, as was reported today in the media, that 50% of St. Lawrence County residents have at least one shot at this time. So that's good news. I know with spring break coming up, there's a lot of questions about travel. What has been presented now by the Governor and Department of Health is that anyone who has had their vaccinations and 2 weeks have passed, that they would be able to travel outside of just at this time it was only the contiguous states, the ones who were around New York, but they can travel beyond that. There is a travel form that they are required to fill out when they travel, and that's on the Department of Health website, but they would be able to travel without having to quarantine and without having to be tested. Also, those who have had COVID in the past, if it's within the 90 days, they would not have to either with the testing or the quarantine. Now, there has been some information that's been put out by the governor. I'm not sure if it's yet been put in regulation by the Department of Health that anyone may be able to travel vaccinated or not. But that's something we're seeing as a possibility. More to come on that. We're still awaiting some guidance from the CDC on the 6-foot rule. You probably heard a lot about that lately. It's the one aspect that causes us to not be able to bring a large part of our students, and this is a problem, back to school, and this is an issue across the country. Talk about reducing that as cases are going down from 6 foot to 3 foot. But we don't have yet any guidance that has specifically come that that's going to change. It would change generally at CDC level, then go to New York State Department of Health level, and then down to public health. But we've all had those conversations at the administrative level and starting to prepare for, if we do get the nod that we can move to 3 feet, then we're going to be looking at bringing more students back into school. We'd also like to see some restrictions lifted then if that occurs on buses as well, because we're going to run into transportation issues if there isn't a commensurate change with busing. So that's something to look for. Our winter sports program has continued without interruption. Has gone on very well. Gavin's here tonight, and as part of this, I wanted him to talk about what's coming up with the fall 2 sports.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say I'm
it was nice when Alan and Chris asked me if they could take some of my plan for the musical, and I said, hey, we're all teammates, so why not? So it was great to be able to help them out. As Pat said, to kind of give you to tell you where we're going, kind of tell you where we've been and how things are going, and give you an update on that. Our winter sports have gone very, very well, and that is basically to the hard work of our coaches, you know, Anne Marie, our nursing staff, Tricia Labarge, my assistant, and obviously the parents and players. Everybody's done their part to give everybody the opportunity to play. So I just wanted to thank everybody, and also I'd be remiss without thanking this group of giving our athletes the opportunity to play. So I really appreciate that. What I'm here for tonight, as Pat said, is so we've been allowed to have high-risk sports, which we all know that, but in our plan that I presented for winter, it did not have the high-risk sports of football and volleyball in there because they weren't in the winter season. So now they're in fall 2, which is called fall 2. So I've submitted 2 addendums to this. They do not have to go to the Department of Health. They just have to go to our group. You have to look at them, approve them, and then what we have to do is put them on our website along with our other plan, so people can look at it if they have questions regarding this. This will also be going out to our coaches, our varsity football coach, and obviously our varsity and modified volleyball coaches on this once it's been approved. But it's basically things that we as a section have talked about and athletic directors have talked about, and what we think that will be giving our athletes the best opportunity to participate and be safe, which is our goal. So, but this season will be very short, just like our winter season was. Start roughly around March. It will definitely start on March 22nd, but the end date could vary a little bit. But we're looking to end about April 22nd, around that time frame, because spring seasons will start April 19th. So as we have in winter right now, we're going to have a couple days of overlap. Our basketball teams and hockey teams get done on Monday and Tuesday, and fall season 2 starts on Monday, so there'll be a couple of days overlap. And the reason for our overlap, not all schools have done that, but I just think that our athletes and our coaches and everybody's done such a great job, and we've done everything to our best ability. We haven't had to cancel games. We haven't had large quarantines or anything on that standpoint, so we thought we'd be able to squeeze one more game in for them, because a lot of these players probably could be their last time of playing sports for the winter season. So we want to see if we could squeeze in one more game. So we've done that for every team. So boys and girls hockey will be playing, and both boys and girls basketball, varsity, and JVs will be playing one extra game. So I think so. But other than that, I feel, things can change, obviously, but I feel very confident going forward with this plan and with the help that everybody's given us in and outside of school, that we'll be able to be successful in this short, as I said, a very short season. I don't know, Pat, if you want to talk to me about what the schedule's going to kind of look like, or no? Okay.
Any have questions for Gavin?
Yeah.
In the original high-risk sports plan, there was a discussion about spectators, and there was language that allowed for the consideration of spectators. And seeing as how there hasn't been any instances of quarantine or issues from the sports, I'd like to know why we can't have a senior night with parents to go to the games.
I can answer that pretty easily. It's that decision is made through public health and the superintendents. That's not something that, and Section 10, so that's not something that I can say, hey, I want it or I don't want it. And based on our safety plan that we approved, we said if spectators were changed by Section 10 or by the superintendents, we'd allow spectators in, which has not happened. So based on our safety plan that the board approved, we cannot allow parents in for senior night. We can allow them in
for the senior night presentation, as we're doing right now after the game, but then they have to leave.
What kind of pressure can you bring to bear as a superintendent to Section 10 in public health?
Are we talking about the winter sports right now, or are we
Yep.
talking about going
Yep.
forward? Because the winter sports right now are done in Monday.
A majority of the
If they have a game
school,
left, why can't we look into it?
Well, but it would be, have to be a change by, first of all, this board would have to change that because you passed a safety plan. But we've had this discussion at the superintendent level significantly. There is a consensus, as there is a consensus on many things dealing with the pandemic and trying to reduce risk. I think you are going to see it start opening up in the next level at the fall 2 and the spring. But there hasn't been a consensus for the winter sports.
That's disappointing.
But Gavin, you said it was the Department of Health also has to.
I mean, so the
Do
guidance.
they have to agree between the superintendent and the department?
And I don't want to answer for Pat, but I think it was something that they've been talking together.
You probably can't override the Department of Health, even if all the superintendents wanted to do that.
I think this is more of a let me pull up our, let's see, I have it right here. The agenda from the last meeting, we had the safety plan.
While you're looking at that, can I ask a question? About football, I noticed it says there's one scrimmage and one game. Is that scrimmage just inter-squad?
No, that could potentially be, so it could
Okay, well, why
be.
not just do 2 games?
So I've got it right here.
The reason why a lot of schools are just doing a scrimmage is because these athletes have not been practicing anything and give them the opportunity for basically a safety reason, try not to get them more in shape and not getting hurt, because they're going to be just starting. And the issue is going to be some of these players might be going away for break.
Right, I think
So-
they have 10 practices.
10 practices
before
and-
they make contact.
Correct. And some of them might be going away, and so we'll just scrimmage with the ones that potentially can have them in.
Just seems like a lot for one game, but
They want to do it.
Well, they'll get the experience and from ready for fall.
And we have a new football coach, so to help them, and then the kids get to know each other.
It's like a game like the activities they do in the NFL, but it'll get them ready for fall.
But and just on that point, we got 40 players that signed up to play.
That's right.
First 3 bullet points in our plan that we approved talks about spectators and what has to happen for spectators.
What does it say? Don't have it.
Spectators will not be permitted per the Section 10 contest guidelines, winter 2020-2021, until deemed safe and appropriate. Until that point, blah, 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 we live stream. The next bullet, as part of the developed COVID safety plan, the interim guidance for sports and recreation during the COVID-19 public health emergency mandates that health screenings will be required for all employees, coaches, players, and in bold, spectators prior to any sporting activity. Next bullet, if spectators are permitted, all spectators that are allowed per section state guidance will be required to complete the Massena Central Daily Screening Form. Spectators will sign in where they will be notified of the heightened risk due to COVID-19. There's like 6, 7 bullet points there about spectators.
In the first bullet,
I asked last time at the meeting, what is the definition of until deemed safe and appropriate?
until the section agrees that it's safe and appropriate.
Who makes up the section?
This would be a decision of the superintendent of schools of the 18 schools, or no, it wouldn't be just the 18, because you have Franklin County, so it would be all of the Section 10 superintendents along with the Section 10 coordinator. As I said, there's been a lot of discussion, and the consensus was, at this point, was not to change.
So the Department of Health doesn't weigh in at all?
The Department of Health did weigh in on guidelines early on.
This was made by superintendents. That's what I'm taking out of this. Hockey's been rolling in rings, fine. This is extremely disappointing.
Well,
I understand your priorities to get them on the ice. Or
Our pri-
basketball rink.
Our priorities is to keep the schools open. And up until 2 weeks ago, most schools were struggling with keeping schools open because that's our educational mission. We also secondarily want to see kids have a lot of different activities as we do. But the first mission is keeping the schools open, which when this plan was created, that's why, one of the reasons why spectators was such a big issue. We recognize that parents want to be there. That's why we did set up for them to be able to see it visually. And they're setting up separate honoring of the seniors, not having them at the game, but there are senior nights for each of them in a different way, and that's what the schools in the section have decided to do. I do expect going into the next seasons, as we're seeing these plans change, because as the pandemic changes, and we're going to see more outside activities, that there will be spectators allowed. Limited, not just opening it up, but a couple, like we did in the fall for outside sports, a couple per athlete.
Hopefully we're looking far ahead, because I know this was put together at the last minute once Cuomo opened it up, but it seems as though someone should have been thinking of it long before that. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Delaney, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question about the overlap. Will it run like normal sports seasons usually without COVID, where the student will finish, if they're playing basketball, they'll finish the basketball and then go on to the next sport?
Right, well, and so obviously this is a unique season, you don't run into that unless you go to like the state finals or championships, right? So for example, if I have an athlete that's gonna play volleyball and they wanna play, let's say softball, okay, we'll take a girls sport, volleyball and softball. If softball starts on April 19th, and volleyball doesn't get done till the 22nd, they will continue with volleyball till their season's done, and then they can transition into softball. The practices, so the last 2 days with volleyball, those practices or games, those 2 days will carry over for your requirements for practices in the next sport. So in other words, even if you have to have six practices in for softball, and the last 2 days of volleyball, you would be able to carry those 2 days, so you'd only need 4.
Okay.
Yeah. But this doesn't happen unless you go to the States, but we've done it because we wanted to try to get in these 2 short seasons, whereas the spring season will go from April 19th to June, the middle of June. These are only 28-day seasons, so we try to squeeze in a little bit of extra for both these sports in winter and fall too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. Next is the flexible spending plan extension, which is on the agenda also for approval tonight. Very briefly, I think most of you know that we offer a flex plan through the IRS law for our employees. This is for medical, dental, and child care, where they can put money in a pre-tax plan in order to pay for items that aren't covered under their insurance, generally, is the way that it works. In Massena, we allow, under our plan, for a grace period of usually 2.5 months after the plan ends, and the plan ends on June 30th, and so usually there's about 2.5 months where employees can still have access to their funds for that time period. Now, during the pandemic, there's been a significant decrease in people going to the doctor, to the dentist, even childcare, and our employees have had a difficult time at needing this money, and the issue is if you don't spend the money, you lose it. So under the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, they will extend this period up to 12 months, but I do need board approval for that. So by approving this, you're approving our employees to be able to extend the time that they get to use their flexible spending money for a year. Any questions on this? The next two are about creating teacher assistant positions. The first is at Madison. Currently, we have a 0.6 full-time equivalent reading teacher through St. Lawrence Louis Boces. It's also shared with Trinity. Trinity has informed us that they're not going to have that same service next year. And we've analyzed the cost of continuing the same service, the value of the service, and our recommendation is that we hire our own teacher assistant that can work under one of our reading teachers at Madison. It'll provide for more flexibility in schedule. We'll have somebody there full-time rather than part-time. I provide a memo from Principal Chapman, and she worked with Stephanie Allen, our Director of Curriculum, to present this proposal. So I think this is a good change for the district. It gives us some more flexibility without much additional cost. And this would be, you'd establish this tonight by resolution. We would be filling it for the 21-22 school year. The other one at the high school would be actually for this year. Currently we have one ELA and one math teacher that provides intervention. Intervention meaning to help students who are at risk of not meeting standards in ELA and math above and beyond what the classroom teacher provides. And we do have some money in our school improvement grant that we could allocate for that this year. And so Alan and I have had some discussions on this, and he's requested that we add a teacher assistant for math intervention for this year. As we talked about earlier with the budget, I expect that if we do receive some additional funding, that's going to be one of the requests from our buildings, is to provide that additional support for students who are struggling, especially during the pandemic.
There was a question asked a while ago about the 12th period or something. Did Jodell ask?
Yeah, after school period.
Is that being utilized?
Not during the pandemic, no.
Is that contractual?
Is it contractual? Contractual 7.5-hour workday. And at the high school level, we have teachers that are coming in early so that we can screen students. And then they leave, they can leave. Alan might be able to, am I missing anything with the 12?
No, I mean, that's the crux of it, is to get the building open soon enough to screen all the kids. We had to bring in the staff earlier to make sure we had supervision in the hallways and the classrooms were open. So that's why that time flexed to the beginning of the day, and that's really what impacted 12th period. I would say in the defense of teachers, there's a lot of them that are still trying to do it as best they can, but not all.
Okay.
Depends on what time they come in.
I mean, not knowing that and knowing that question existed, I just want to be sure we're using our existing resources before we apply for more.
Any other questions on this too? Okay, next is Give Back Days. This is also on the agenda for your review and approval. Each year we have emergency days built into our calendar. It's usually 5, 6, or 7, most often 6. This year it was 7. So there's a 180-day calendar plus 7 emergency days. In the teacher's contract, any days over 182 that are not used as emergency days are given back as give-back days. So those are days that we don't have students or teachers in the building. So 7 days. We used 2 of them when we had to pivot to remote learning at the beginning of the year when we had a spike in cases in September. And those 2 days would have been days that the teachers were here, but the students were not. So we used 2 of the 7 days there, and that brings us to that 182 in the contract. So now we have 5 days. We did use 1 day for a true snow day this year. That's it. That's all we had. It's pretty mild winter so far overall. So that leaves 4 days out of the 7 left. And we keep 1 for the last day of school because on that day, even though it's at the high school level, it's in the Regents calendar that it doesn't count. You don't have to have students in that day because it's part of the Regents calendar. But in this K through 8 world, you would have to have students on that day. If there wasn't, and if you don't, then it needs to be considered one of the emergency days because it's part of the 180 day, 180 days. And 180 days applies to building by building. It's not district. And if you go below 180 days in any one of the buildings, then you lose state aid. You lose 1/80th of your 180th of your state aid. So that leaves 3 days. And so that's why the recommendation is that 2 of those days be used to extend the spring break on the 12th and 13th of April, and then the 3rd day be used for the extension of the Memorial Day weekend on the 28th.
Do they have to be handed out that way, or is that just a choice that, because I know the Regents, a lot of them likely being canceled, if there was any consideration just to end school, keep the same breaks and just end school earlier that last week?
Alan, you have your hand?
Only because the tentative Regents schedule that came out pushes right to that last week of school
Does it?
where it would normally be. So if we have to offer those 4 exams that ESSA would require, it's gonna be that last week right at the end of the year.
Is there any thought to the students and, thinking about the number of impoverished students within our district, to extend those breaks even longer, creates a longer gap between school? If you were to make smaller breaks that are shorter and spread those out, would that be in better interest to those students as opposed to the adults that want a longer break?
It's a good point. One of the challenges you're going to run into off the bat is any kind of shared programs like CTE programs we have with other schools. Our CTE students would not be in school on that day.
As long as the other districts follows,
follow suit? Right, if they followed suit on that. We do track and we keep a spreadsheet of the school districts. What days are you going to get back? For that very reason,
I just thought it'd be great to introduce the kids into that discussion.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving on, the Police Activities League Extended Day Grant. Per our policy, I'm bringing forward the concept of a grant that we're taking a look at with our PALS program. That's a Boys and Girls Club. They are applying for a grant through the State Ed Department for an extended day, an after-school grant, which they could receive, if successful, $350,000 a year for 5 years. And for them to apply, they needed to partner with a school district, and we already have many activities going on with PALS. So we've met with their, Kristen Calaruso-Martin and I have met with their board of directors a couple of times, and we've been working with their executive director, Zach Monroe, to help them to put together the application. What it would look like if they were successful is it would create a 3 to 5 program in our elementary, junior high, and also at the high school, which we already have a 3 to 5 program, but it would expand on that. They would pay teachers in each of those buildings, 2 per building, 1 at the high school, in order to provide academic support for the students. They would also be getting college students to come in and high school students to mentor our students, and they would provide violence prevention activities, a curriculum, and some extracurricular activities, some fun activities for them. So that 2 hours, that's kind of a critical after-school time period, they would fill that with a combination of academics and extracurriculars. And it fits right in. I know I've come to the board the last couple of years and talked to you about a 3 to 5 at elementary and junior high. This provides, if successful, provides a catalyst for that. It would include also leasing our buses for transportation, because transportation is one of the biggest issues for an after-school program. I think they put together a solid application, and I hope they are successful, and if they are, we'll be bringing it back for approval to the board.
How many, is there a cap on the number of kids? I can't open it up on this, it won't let me open it up without getting some app or something.
I don't know if there's a cap, but what they're anticipating is 125 elementary students, 55 junior high students, and 40 high school students. That's kind of what they're looking at, 125, 55, and 40. They'd employ teachers and counselors, as I said. It would run 4 days a week, so on Mondays and Wednesdays, there'd be 3 of the schools running, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, another 2 schools are running, and then Fridays, it's kind of always a challenge to keep kids after school on Fridays. So
is there any consideration of that stuff to maybe align the high school days when it's not a day of sporting events? If there's any wiggle room so you eliminate conflicts and open up and create opportunities?
and that one, we'd have to talk about. That one may be a little more.
I mean, there's no guarantee you can make it, but if it's considered or out there, maybe, I know one kid of mine I'd like to see go to something like that.
All stuff, right? So games every single day of some type.
Yeah, it's hit or miss, depending on what sport's running, what time the practice is.
Yeah, that's why I mean, if it can be considered or looked at, so that you don't have those conflicts at the lower grade level.
Right.
So.
Exactly. In the high school, and a little bit at the junior high too.
Yep.
All right, no action on that one, just wanted to give you an update of where we're headed with that. And the MOA for the Board of Elections, this is an MOA we have each year to use the Board of Elections machines. And so that's on the agenda. We already talked about the election inspectors, they're on tonight. The external audit services bid, we put the external audit out for bid, as we do generally every 5 years for fiscal, for good fiscal practice, and our current auditor was the sole bidder, and Safe Arts out of Malone, and we put the bid, we showed that the bid is attached to the board agenda. Any questions on that?
Carl's pretty known quantity.
Yes, he's been with us a number of years now. This will be, I don't know, Nick, was he, I know they had the last 5-year contract. Were they here before that too? So we're glad to keep that service going. Yeah. He speaks Nick's language, oddities. Next is the snowplow contract. We recently our current contract is up. It's a 5-year contract. It's up in June. Danco is our current contractor for snowplow removal. We had 3 bidders, and we're recommending that Danco continue with that service. They were the low bidder. We changed it up a little bit this time. We had alternates in the bid. Alternate 1 was to provide the plowing without the salt. We would buy the salt because we can buy it cheaper on contract with the county. The second alternate was continuing the way they do now, which is to provide the plowing and buy the salt. And they also put in a bid for any excess salt. And so we had three bids, And if we go with us purchasing the salt, the district, which we can get it cheaper, then Danco is our lowest bidder, and we're comfortable with them. They've been doing our contract for a number of years now. We're happy that we have the opportunity to buy the salt, and the Village of Massena is allowing us to use a portion of their salt barn. And I think this is a good move all around for the district to stay with the same contractor, but purchase our salt and put it in the barn. They have to have the equipment to go to the barn, take it out, and do the business. And finally, we have a lot of donations to the district, and they're listed there. Jefferson has several. Congratulations to one of our teachers, Faith Janak, has been awarded a State Farm Assistant Grant, and now $2,500 for innovative teaching in the classroom. So that is great for her. We have Nick Toth, who's a child of one of our former teachers, who's donated $300 to Jefferson, and also their Alcoa grant of $500. Madison has an Adopt a Classroom grant for Miss Ross's classroom. To purchase some learning materials there. And the biggest one we have is the Massena Hospital Foundation has awarded $5,262 to the district for our mindfulness program. And this would go to our mindfulness rooms in each of our schools. This is a new organizational component in the Massena Hospital. It's called the North Country Wellness Resource. And they approached us and were interested in donating over $5,000 to our effort. So we thank them very much.
Next item on the agenda is our business group. I see Nick and Mallory here, so you guys will take it.
Besides the budget status, budget transfer reports, year-to-date we brought in $27.1 million. We've expended $25.5 million and have $24.6 million remaining for the rest of the year. And just a handful of budget transfers.
On the February Treasurer's Report, the month started with $36.4 million, cash receipts of $3.6 million, cash disbursements of $4.2 million, ending February with $35.7 million. On the internal claims audit report, 6 warrants verified in the amount of $1.5 million, 250 total claims audited, 1 error with an invoice dated prior to the PO. And on the BOCES claims audit report, 1 warrant verified in the amount of $2 million, 3 total claims with no error.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions for our business group? Okay, we can move on to our recommended actions. First item, acceptance of the bid for our audit services.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. So now we'll move to award the bid for our audit services. So we'll move together.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Approval for our communicable disease pandemic plan. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Thank you. Approval of the resolution to amend the MCSD flexible spending plan. Did we discuss that?
Yeah, that was a question.
Yep.
So moved.
Any discussion?
On meeting.
All those in favor?
You were looking at Facebook.
This is very exciting.
I was trying to get
Very
your
exciting.
numbers extra.
That's probably it.
Approval of the MCHS musical safety plan.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Well done, Joe.
Next item, we have 3 policies for second reading or adoption. Policy 3421, Title IX, and sex discrimination. Policy 5730, school bus safety program, and policy 5760, qualifications of bus drivers.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Next group, we're going to rescind 2 policies. Policy 6111, building assignments of husbands, wives, and blood relations, and policy 6180, professional staff consulting activities. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor? Next 2 are for review only. Policy 6111, testing misconduct and mandatory reporting, and policy 6113, extracurricular personnel code of conduct.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just to point out, the duplicate, what looks like a duplicate number was a renumbering. That was another instance where we're trying to be consistent with the Erie 1 policy manual.
All those in favor? Next 3 policies are for first reading. Policy 3420, non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district. Policy 5633, gender-neutral single occupancy bathrooms, and policy 5761, drug and alcohol testing for school bus drivers and other safety-sensitive employees. I'm sorry, I gotta go to the next page. There's 3 more that are for first reading. Policy 6110, code of ethics for BOE members and all district personnel. Policy 6180, staff-student relations, fraternization. And policy 6120, equal employment opportunity. Those 6 first reading.
Second.
Any discussion?
Were there other, I'm just scanning this, under the drug and alcohol testing, it sort of lists other employees, but I think it only, does it talk about more than just the bus drivers?
That's just bus drivers.
Or did it say for other sensitive employees?
Well, that's the only one that has that currently.
Weird name. Policy lists other safety-sensitive employees, but it's only bus drivers.
Actually, the policy, the subject of the policy is just out, it says drug and alcohol testing for school bus drivers. That may be just a sort of an error in the boardroom, more than an error on the policy.
All right.
Anything else? All those in favor? First reading. Moving on to approval of the MOA for the St. Lawrence County Board of Elections to use their voting machines. So moved. All those in favor? Approval of a resolution to establish a teacher assistant position at Madison School.
So moved.
Any more questions or discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Approval of a resolution to establish a teaching assistant position at the high school.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Approval of the give back days of April 12th, April 13th, and May 28th.
So moved.
All those in favor? acceptance of the bid for snowplow contract for 2021 to 25. Any more discussion on that? All those in favor? Approval of the bid, awarding of the bid for the snowplow contract.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Approval of the donations to the district.
So moved.
Again, we'd like to thank all those involved in helping us out. Very much appreciated. All those in favor? Approval of the budget status report.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor? Approval of the budget transfer report.
So moved.
All those in favor? Approval of the treasurer's report for February 2021.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Approval of the internal claims audit report general for February.
So moved.
All those in favor? Approval of internal claims audit report for BOCES for February 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Approval of the CSE and CPSE report.
So moved.
All those in favor? And personnel items, Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Pat. I recommend the personnel items that are on the list with one change. Number 32 should read D7. D7 with a salary of $4,617. D7, $4,617. And with that change, I recommend 1 through 98 on the report.
So moved.
Any more discussion on those personnel moves? All those in favor? Next item would be, any members have new business to discuss in the future?
Nothing for agendas, but I just would like to put out the reminder that I think it's the 29th. There are currently 7 of us signed up for the training session, full training or review of the super eval product for Mr. Brady's superintendent evaluation purposes. And I hope the 2 folks that have not yet committed to doing that do.
Yep. With regard to the graduation gowns, the note here mentions that the administration made the decision to move to one color as requested by the Diversity Club. And then, of course, I heard this from my daughter, but there was a survey put out that basically said that we're moving to one color. And the first question was, if we were to switch to a single color, would you support this? And then I asked what the color was. So what was the purpose of the survey, just to get the color? I mean, it's sort of not I mean, if it is voted on or isn't voted on, if it's a vote, it's a vote, but it seems like it was rammed down my throat. So one group came with a concern about the color of the gowns. There was a minority group, and we changed the whole graduation. And I think we should consider things like, look at those in a broader sense before we do them. If it's going to be a democratic process, it's a democratic process. If it's not, it's not. But I don't think it should be all over the place with how we implement.
Well, I would say that there are certain times where the needs of that minority outweigh what might be called the tyranny of the majority.
So was that the only option that was considered, or could the
I don't know, I'd have to go back, Kevin, and look and see exactly what they did with the survey. What we did is
Jim, let me finish asking my question.
Sure.
So were they given any other options besides one color? Could the minority that was concerned about the color that they had be given a choice to pick their own color?
I don't think that was a question, but again, I can go back. I don't think there was a question about picking their own color. I think it was a question about whether they approved of going to one color or not.
Who, the diversity group?
The diversity group is the one who brought it forward. I brought it forward actually last year in the spring, brought it to the policy committee. We looked at the policy and determined that it wasn't a Board of Education change in policy and that it would be left up to the administration to make a decision. And that's how we went forward. And the administration came to me with a recommendation to change it, and I agreed with that recommendation based on the needs of that minority group.
I have two questions on it as well. I know that when it was originally mentioned, you said that a survey was brought out, and I did take the survey. Was that offered to grades 9 through 12? Because I know that it's going to affect all the grades to come. And then I also agree with what Mr. Pareto was saying. If it hasn't been like determined to only be one color, would you let students, no matter if they're part of the minority or not, determine, like, select what color they want to wear so then everyone can be happy with the decision? Like when you fill out your form for what size and stuff you need, can you choose red or blue?
That's a decision I'd have to go back to the high school administration and have that discussion.
Can we hear about that at the next board meeting?
That's what the board wants. That's what we'll put on the agenda.
I just had a quick question of how we got here in the first place. I don't remember how we got here to the big question on what color gowns we're wearing at graduation. What caused us to have this discussion in the first place? I guess I'm confused.
The high school diversity club, I should let Mr. Brady explain it. You're much closer to it than we are.
Well, yeah, like I explained, the High School Diversity Club did come forward last year and made that request. We brought it up through policy because there is a policy and dress code, and we had just gotten off a discussion about graduation, cords and so forth.
The one color is so that...
So there's gender neutral.
Right, but wouldn't having two colors and have it be a choice achieve the same thing? Doesn't matter what color you wear, based on whether or not your gender, doesn't matter. If I'm a boy and I want to wear blue, great. I want to wear red, great.
It's just more palatable to the students, I think.
I wasn't a question that was really.
Right. Well, I understand that. I kind of agree to explore that.
I don't know, I would think one color would be most acceptable across the whole spectrum. If it came down to a vote, I think that's just my opinion, so. That's all it's
But you mentioned a vote, Mr. Bronchetti, but the fact is that this issue is not really anything to be determined by the board. It's something to be determined either by the administration or by the students.
So our job is to evaluate the superintendent in this role and how that is carried out with administration. What you're saying, you don't have any say?
We, and I think we discussed this at the full board level. The policy committee recommendation was that the dress code states that there is to be traditional graduation attire, and that the Native American students can dress in their traditional fashion if they so choose. Otherwise, it's traditional cap and gown. We determined at the policy level, and I believe we brought it to the full board, whether it was for a vote or a recommendation, or as a recommendation, I don't remember, that the issue of color of the traditional cap and gown was not anything that was really covered by the policy.
Perception's everything.
But
Tradition's everything.
nowhere in the policy does it mention red or blue. It says traditional graduation attire or words to that effect.
So I'm just confused, what are we looking for here? I guess that if the students had a strong opinion and I felt like a majority of the students did get a chance to vote, then I would always probably vote to go with them unless it was something egregious. But I don't feel like, after listening to this, maybe everyone knew about the vote, or maybe it was the majority of the students voting. So that was concerned.
Exactly.
And I know from a student perspective, like, this survey went out, and I really doubt many students did get to vote, especially if it was only sent to the seniors. And we haven't heard anything since the original survey went out. So all the seniors, like, all the students are completely in the dark over this topic. It was just kind of decided by a few students.
And if this is something that goes back to the club for a vote or a discussion, do they have enough time? Because parents have already ordered their students' stuff, cap and gown.
They already have ordered them?
My daughter's a senior, I ordered hers.
Well, that's the problem.
Another thing on it too is it was mentioned that there was no option on the survey.
I sent it to Pat, the survey.
Like, there was no option on there to choose, like, to answer if they'd rather choose, right?
It said basically, we're gonna change to one color. Then the first question was, do you agree with one color or not? But it said before that, we're changing to one color, the administration's changing to one color. Then it asked the question, how do you feel about that? Then it asked, which color do you prefer?
Yeah, I feel like on the survey there should have been an option where you could put your own opinion on it and also have the option to choose your own color given the option, because I feel like that would fit everyone's, like, it would make everyone happy in the end.
I don't think the individual choosing their color is the right answer to this issue.
They just get to do it.
The issue came up because of a diversity group. Well, some students may not want to choose a gender. So I think one color is the right answer. If we're gonna solve this issue, I think one color is the answer.
Is that how we solve it, your say, or is the board,
I'm sorry?
the whole board, or just your decision?
I'm just giving my opinion. We're having a
Fair.
discussion, that's all. That's just my opinion.
Well, first of all, I really respect the fact that Delaney's getting into this conversation. I feel like we were actually getting some information from.
That's the purpose of the
Yeah,
exercise.
and I'm happy for that. So if you feel, as the student representative of this board, that people were not given their say, I respect that.
Because if the whole idea of the one color is so that you don't have to choose a gender, the colors of the graduation uniforms, or whatever you want to call them, weren't decided to show gender in the first place. So letting the student choose, they get what they feel comfortable in, they get what they want to walk across the stage in.
We do have the problem now, though, that the gowns are already over.
Right.
That's going to be a problem.
Alan, you wanted to say something?
I mean, I can provide some clarity, but I don't know that it's going to be clarity that is going to really help. The survey that went out early on in the year was not the survey that was put out by the school, which is why it looked the way it did. It was not formed in a credible way or in a way in which I would have written it. And as soon as I knew that survey went public, I asked the student to pull it back because it wasn't put out in a way that I would have put it out. I would have put it out in a more in a more neutral sort of way. Once it went out, I did discuss with Mr. Brady where this issue lay, which was very much, it was talked about a policy committee and there was no decision on color. After looking at the issue, I was faced as the administrator to make a recommendation about a change from color where on one side of it, students have a preference for color, which if it's changed on them, while it is a change and nobody's ever comfortable with change, doesn't really represent a significant, I'm not sure of the right word I'm looking for, but it doesn't impact them in a significant way. Whereas in this case, the minority was extremely impacted in a negative way if we didn't make the change. And I was left in the spot of trying to referee what the right decision was to do there, and obviously I spoke with Mr. Brady about that. And, you know, that's sort of where we ended up where we are.
Delaney, do you think if there was a choice of color that some, being that the tradition has been one gender wears one color, one gender wears the other, that there would actually be girls would wear blue and boys would wear red?
I do think so, and I don't think it would be much harder to implement than how we already order our cap and gown, because it could just be a checkbox, would you prefer blue or red? And that, I think, would be really easy to do. And I do think that the students would think it was nice that they could choose, and then those minorities do feel like they were taken into consideration as well.
That would be something that I think would certainly be possible for next year if we were to look at it. I have some concerns about what is possible for this year at this point. You know, certainly that's a conversation we could get into going forward. But I'm not sure at this point what's possible in light of how far along in the process we are. So I'm just being honest and telling you everything I can.
Discussion?
It's one of the best ones we've ever had with the ex officio student board member. I mean, it really is.
Thank you for mixing it up a little bit.
Good job representing.